Hello everyone, and welcome to Practice to Pass session for Strategic Business Reporting SBR September 2020 exam sitting. To give you a brief introduction of myself, my name is Syed Amjad Hussain, and I'm currently teaching at tuition provider SCAN, School and College of Accountancy, Rawalpindi. The paper I taught to ACCA students is financial accounting, financial reporting, the F3, F7, and strategic business reporting. My teaching experience was from last 10 to 12 years I'm teaching. Most of the time I was teaching on a visiting basis, but from last 4 to 5 years I'm working as a permanent faculty member at the college, at the tuition provider. I'm an ACCA member. I have done bachelor in law, and I have a master in commerce last 15 years. I'm doing some sort of job. My main experience was related to Standards and Poor's Global, where my main responsibility was basically to train the students, to train the new internees or new individuals who joined the organization. So I was working there as a lead trainer for my department. So before moving to this session, just to give you an idea how we are looking into the paper, I believe if you want to pass the exam, specifically SBR or any other ACCA qualification, any other paper, you need to understand how the paper was designed by the examiner, by the professional body. Because once you understand the main idea of the paper, it would be very easy for you to get yourself prepared for the paper once you are paying for the paper. I mean, once you opted for a specific paper. So let's discuss with the paper overview how SBR syllabus was driven and how it was created. So there are basically 6 main sections in SBR syllabus. These includes the A section. Most of the time you might have gone through this whole area in your textbooks, and from ACCA website you might find out how the course was designed. So the main and the first most important area was fundamental ethics and professionals principles. You need to apply professional ethics and professional principles to ethical dilemmas when you are working as a professional accountant, and what are the consequences of unethical behavior, how it's impact the users of financial statement, the stakeholders of the company to whom you are providing the financial statements, or you're providing the position of the company. So that's the first most important area, and this is very often discussed, and it's most of the time this is the area which was many times discussed by the examiner, and the examiner is going to ask you in different scenarios how this ethical issue was raised up and how you're going to solve this issue. This is a core to the SBR syllabus. Not only to SBR syllabus, you might have studied this specific area, fundamental ethics and professional principles, in many other papers, not just SBR. So this is one of the important area in SBR syllabus. So you need to understand how unethical behavior impact the users of financial statement, or how it impacts the decision of a decision maker who is actually making a decision on his either an investment or his divestment or any other sort of decision with respect to the specific entity to which you are providing the financial statement you are providing or you're reporting for the specific entity. The next area is the financial reporting framework. I'm quite sure all of you must have a very great idea about what framework is and how it works basically, and all of you have an idea what is the difference between framework and the international accounting standards. Those are provided by International Accounting Standard Board. So framework is the body, is a document which actually provides a baseline for the development of all the accounting standards. So all the accounting standard, you must have seen about the consistency or consistency within the accounting standard that was basically developed based on this financial reporting framework. So most of the time, whenever a new standard was developed by International Accounting Standard Board committees, they are always looking into the framework. They should consider the principles discussed within the framework. So within this area of the syllabus, you will be looking into how financial reporting framework works for the individuals, for those who are professional accountants, how they can solve any problems or any issues that raise up to their raise up when they are working. So how to account for all such things. This is something the most crucial area in financial reporting framework, and this is also important part of your syllabus which was discussed within the exam by the examiner. So the next section, which is section C, this is basically reporting the financial performance of a range of entities. So you're supposed to provide your professional judgment in the reporting of the financial performance of a range of entities, how those entities have specifically performed within a financial year. So most of the time I would say that that area basically relates to some sort of interpretation of the financial statements, not specifically, because that's another area, section E of your course SBR syllabus, where you are looking into interpretation of financial statements, but that is specific to the view of different or specific stakeholder. But in this case, you need to evaluate how the company is actually performing in respect of their financial and non-financial indicators. Then you are supposed, the section D, the next section within your syllabus area was financial statements of group entities. That's something the most important area, and this actually constitute the first question in your SBR exam. So you need to be prepared very well for the group entities, group statements, or financial consolidated financial statements. In this case, you are not supposed to prepare the whole financial statements, whole consolidated financial statement for SBR exam. In this exam, SBR, which was well defined, which is not specifically a well advanced paper, over here you will be provided with different scenarios, and you need to answer how you are going to account for with such specific scenarios within the consolidated financial statement. So this is one of the most important area I would recommend everyone, so you have a very strong grip over financial statement of group entities. We will be looking into the exam pattern, how the exam was designed, how the paper was designed by the examiner in the next section. But right now we're looking into the syllabus, the course area, the overview of the paper of SBR. So the next section of your syllabus of SBR is basically interpretation of financial statement for different stakeholders. This area is where your technical skills comes up. You are supposed to provide information to different stakeholder groups. It's not specific to all the stakeholder groups. In a situation, you will be provided to provide analysis, your own analysis, a technical analysis, how the financial statements have impacted a group of stakeholders. For example, if the examiner would ask you that the lenders of the business are concerned about the performance of a business, how you are going to interpret it using different indicators, using different ratios analysis, or any other aspect that you're going to use while interpreting those financial statements. So that's another area where you should excel yourself, how I'm going to satisfy the needs of different stakeholders, or how I can explain them how the financial statements have impacted their stakes within the organization for which we are providing the financial statements, so we are reporting for an entity. Section F is basically the impact of changes in accounting regulations. That's more specific to the current issues. What are the new developments in the accountancy profession, or in the International Accounting Standard Board? What changes were made by the what change are required to the existing standards, and if there are any new situation or scenario comes up for which there is no standard at all which is existing, and an International Accounting Standard Board needs to develop a new standard. So this specific area is basically how we are looking into the future aspect of accountancy profession. So this important area is basically whenever you are studying SBR paper, in most of the time, if you are following the books provided, the textbooks which are provided by any of the any of the approved texture provided of ACCAs like Kaplan or BPP, you might be getting some specific bullet points at the end of the accounting standard. What are the drawbacks within the accounting standard and how those can be improved, or what are the inconsistencies between the accounting standard. So those are the areas you need to be very careful, and you should be very conscious about all those areas. So next thing is we need to understand the paper. If any one of you has any question with respect to this course area, you can ask me, or we'll be moving on. We'll moving on to the next section of our presentation, that is SBR, understanding the paper, how you can understand how this paper was developed and how the scores were assigned to different different areas of your paper. Okay, I believe I don't find any questions, so I'm looking into the next section, which is understanding your paper. So SBR paper constitutes of two main sections, and every section include two questions. Every section have two questions at all. So all the four questions are compulsory. There is no choice available for you. It's a 3 hours and 15 minutes paper, and your skills will be assessed over their paper. Section A basically comprises of two scenario based questions that totals 50 marks for you guys. So the first question in your paper, as I've discussed earlier, is basically related to the group financial statements from syllabus area D. That's the specific area we have just discussed, the D area, from where the consolidated or group accounting financial statements were discussed, the different scenarios, change in group structure, or acquisition of a foreign subsidiary, and how you can going to account for the foreign subsidiary within the financial statements. If you have acquired or disposed of a subsidiary during the year, how you're going to account for such different subsidiaries within the group. Now, important thing is over here, you will not be getting a through question of consolidation within SBR syllabus like F7 syllabus, which you have studied earlier. In F7, you might be finding out a through question in which you might be asked to develop a complete set of financial statement, or a consolidated balance sheet, or a consolidated income statement, or both. So in this situation, you will be only looking into specific areas. For example, examiner might be asking you to provide for the accounting entries, or provide for the impact of acquired subsidiary within the year, how it's going to impact the group financial statements. And in this scenario, you are also supposed to interpret it. SBR is a bit different paper. In F7, your calculation was already tested by the examiner. In this paper, the examiner is looking into how you can interpret the standards, how you can explain those standards, or in other words, I would say how you can prepare the notes to the financial statement, the disclosure notes for a specific scenario that was provided to you. So in this paper, you might be providing the calculation along with, not just with the calculation, you must be provided along with some discussion on that specific area, how you can account for that discussion, how you have accounted for specific item within the financial statement. You need to give an understanding to the stakeholders how this impact was made on the financial statement, and how the user of the financial statement can understand the workings made behind the financial statements, or the line item provided within the financial statement, like how the goodwill was calculated, how other aspects, NCI, non-controlling interest, was put it into the financial statement in the balance sheet. So that's a different aspect of your paper. So in this case, you're not supposed to just provide consolidated balance sheet or income statement just like F7. In this case, you might be looking into multiple subsidiaries. Along with this, you can be tested by the examiner based on consolidated cash flows. That's another area that was added in SBR, which was not present in F7 syllabus. So within the consolidated cash flows, you will be provided with consolidated income statement and balance sheet, or a specific area, specific section of your balance sheet or income statement, and you might be asked by the examiner to provide consolidated cash flows, or cash flows from operating, consolidated cash flows from operations, or investing activities, or financing activities, but it's not going to provide you a through question for your consolidated cash flows. So you need to be very careful that in this paper you might be provided with the chunks of specific consolidation section. It includes balance sheet, income statement, or cash flows. It's not specific for the examiner that he is going to limit himself, that he can ask you question either from balance sheet or from income statement or a cash flows. It could be possible that within a single scenario, examiner might be providing you to provide extracts of consolidated financial statement, one extract for consolidated balance sheet, another extract for consolidated income statement, and there could be a section that asks you to provide some extracts of consolidated cash flows. So you need to be very careful when you are preparing yourself that you're not going to miss a single section of your paper. So need to be prepared very through for this paper to get a pass criteria. Next is consideration of financial reporting issues for syllabus area. See, it is possible that examiner might be going to ask you how you are going to interpret the financial performance of an entity, depending upon if that entity was added up or if an entity was removed from the group. So section C of your syllabus might be tested as well, along with the consolidation question. So two sections might be clubbed up in this section where you can provide your answers. So you need to be very cautious about it, that how you're going to account for with all those aspects of your paper. No. Next question in your paper, question number 2, is basically related to ethical implications and reporting implications of specific event in a given scenario. So it's not to any specific area of your syllabus, but I would say that it might be giving you a situation where there are some ethical dilemmas, and examiner asking you how you can solve those ethical dilemmas. Those are given in a specific event or a scenario. If those ethical dilemmas remain in existence, how these ethical dilemmas impact the stakeholders, not just the shareholders, because in most of the scenarios you might be finding out that the directors of the company or those who are involved or those who are engaged for the running of the business, like board of directors of the company, would want to just impact one portion of the stakeholders, and they will compromise the negative impact of that specific accounting treatment on the rest of the stakeholders. So you need to have a very balanced approach whenever you are looking into such scenarios. So in my understanding, how you can answer your question number 2, the second question in your section number 1, is the only thing you need to be considering when answer the question, if I am adhering to the accounting standards or not. Because whenever you are not adhering to the accounting standard, that simply means you are not fulfilling the requirements, or you're not fulfilling the basic understanding of the stakeholders, or the basic requirements of the stakeholder, what they want. Because all the accounting standard will give you an idea how we can satisfy the basic needs of all the stakeholder groups, not just to specific stakeholder groups. So whenever you find out a question, you must be looking into what are the drawbacks given in that scenario, what are the shortcomings within this scenario, and how we can overcome those shortcomings. In short, I would say, if there is, you need to ask yourself a question when you are looking into the second section of your paper. You must be asking a question to yourself: what went wrong, or what is done which is not provided within the accounting standard, or any treatment which conflict with the existing accounting standard. That's where the ethical dilemma comes in and ethical implications comes in. And there is something, the reporting issues are there, and that's something you're compromising any of the stakeholders' concerns when you are compromising a single aspect of your accounting standards. So in question 2, your main job or your main responsibility is to make sure you are answering, or you are applying the accounting standard as it is provided by the International Accounting Standard Board, what you have studied in your SBR syllabus as a through course. So for this section, you must make sure you have a very strong group or your accounting standard, and you'll be able to apply those accounting standard to a specific situation. So we'll be looking into the next section, that is section B, which also comprises of 2 questions. I'll just give you one more idea. In section A, you cannot have a guess about it, whether how much marks are allocated to first question or second question. It's 100% dependent upon the examiner discretion, if he's going to assign 30 marks to question number 1 and 20 marks to question number 2, or 25 marks to question number 1 and 25 marks to question number 2. But that's something the whole bifurcation of the scores were allocated, either 20 marks or 25 marks or 30 marks to question number 1, and the rest of the marks would be allocated to question number 2 in section A. While when we're looking into section B, it comprises of 2 basic case scenarios or case studies where 25 marks are allocated to each of those questions. For question number 3 and question number 4, you will be given 25 marks for each question. So if you are looking into the first question in section B, which is basically based on modern business scenarios that requires application of accounting standard of those scenarios. So if you're looking into this section, question number 2 in section A and question number 1 in section B, so within the section A, you will be provided with certain accounting treatments for which the board of directors or the relevant authority within the company is considering an accounting treatment which was wrong. So you will be asked how you can resolve those ethical dilemmas. Like in section A, we have in section A of our syllabus, we have discussed that we would be taught how fundamental ethics and professional principles will be accounted for. So within the second question of section A, you would look into how you can solve those ethical dilemmas and what of the ethical principle or what the professional duties of an accountant were compromised and how you can overcome those situations. That's the main idea of section A. While in section B, you will be provided with a case study where you have to provide an accounting treatment for specific item. The examiner is going to ask you how you can account for with that specific item in your professional life when you'll be providing advice or you will be making an accounting treatment to that specific situation. So in this case, a scenario is given and you need to apply a specific standard on that specific scenario. So it's not the case that you will be provided a single scenario. It could be possible that you will be provided with multiple scenarios within the section B, question 1 of the section B. So it's not just one scenario. It could be possible there will be multiple scenarios, and you have to apply different accounting standard on those different scenarios, or there could be one scenario where you have to apply different accounting standard on that specific scenario. So you should be cautious about it, that if you are preparing your accounting standard well, you are able to answer your question 2 in section A and question 1 in section B. It would be pretty easy for you because accounting concepts are always applicable to this scenario. So it's not the case that you are able to answer this first question in section B and second question in section A. It could be possible that within the consolidated section, the consolidated financial statement, the group financial statement, you might be asked to solve a specific issue that is related to the accounting standard. So accounting standard knowledge is going to help you out within this syllabus, throughout this syllabus, because this SBR course is basically based on the understanding and your through development of the knowledge of accounting standards rather than anything else. So you should be very careful how these accounting standards impact your paper when you're appearing in the paper. So the next question in section B is that contains any elements of the syllabus. So it's not something where the examiner is restricted to give you a question. Examiner is open to ask you the question from any part of the syllabus, but in this case, the main focus of your examiner is specific to the interpretation of those financial statements. Usually you can say the area E and F of your syllabus, SBR syllabus, was discussed in this section. So you might be asked to interpret the financial statement. You might be given a data and the examiner can ask you how this how the performance of the company entity was engaged. But I would say in this scenario, examiner is going to ask you to make certain adjustments to the given scenario by the application of accounting standard or certain other rules that might be explained within the scenario, and you're supposed to make certain adjustments based on accounting standards. And then examiners are going to ask you, once you have made the adjustment to a specific scenario, now you need to interpret how those adjustment has impacted the stakeholders, or how these changes have changed the decision of the users of financial statement, how their decision or a specific stakeholder group's decision was impacted due to the changes you have made to that specific scenario. Or if those changes were not made to the scenarios, or if the scenario was not accounted for according to the international accounting standard, what was the impact on the users of financial statement? So that's the main interpretation idea, that you need to understand if those changes were not made to a specific scenario, how the users of financial statements decisions was impacted, and if those changes were made to a scenario, how we have changed their expectations, how we have impacted their decision making ability in that specific case scenario. So there is a whole course of your syllabus which always goes around and around to your accounting standards. Basically, along with it, you must have an idea of how ethical issues should be impacted, for which you have a very great knowledge. You have gained a great knowledge from your F8 paper audit and F7 paper, which was the previous course. But in this paper SBR, you'd be given extra knowledge how those ethical issues were impacted. And last thing is consolidation. You have already studied consolidation in your previous paper, like F7 financial reporting. But in SBR, you will be provided an advanced knowledge, the final group accounts, with the multiple subsidiaries, with the multiple companies within the group, how you are going to account for. Along with this, you need to account for how a foreign subsidiary can be accounted for within the financial statements, for which you already have studied IAS 21, the foreign exchange, foreign exchange currencies accounting standard IAS 21, how the application of the last requirement of IAS 21 would be done in this specific paper. And last thing is the cash flow statements. You need to be looking into consolidated cash flow statement, which was very new to SBR syllabus, but I believe that was the easy topic area for individuals to understand how consolidated cash flows actually works and how you can develop your understanding. So that's the main syllabus area understanding. If up to this point anyone has a question with respect to this paper overview or need any further understanding, I'm ready to answer any questions if there is any. Okay, so I don't find any question as of now. If you guys have any, do drop a text to me, a question in the question box. I will be glad to answer your queries or your concerns if you want any clarification in any aspect of your paper overview or syllabus overview. Next thing is that I have inculcated in my presentation is that, because this basic section is, or this basic session is related to how you can pass your paper. So first thing we need to understand is the course area. Second, how the examiner is going to ask you within the paper, where you would be gauged if you qualify the criteria to pass SBR or not, if you have developed such understanding based on which you can attain a passing score in it or not. So those are the basic ideology to understand how this paper was actually developed based on the syllabus which was developed by ACCA examination team. So next thing is now how we can pass the exam paper. So there are a few of the exam tips that I'm going to share with you. So you need to be careful when you are appearing in your paper, how you can attain a passing marks along with the knowledge you have gained within your studies when you are preparing for your SBR exams. Now, within the exam paper, most of the time individuals got a pressure from their a mind fresher that you are sitting within the exam environment, and you might not be performing well. So in that situation, the most important thing is you should be very calm and you should be very cautious about it, and make it in your mind that you have prepared well for the exam, and you would be attaining a passing marks once you are answering the question. Important thing is, most of the time I have got few of the questions from my students that if we appear in the exam and we're looking into the exam paper, we have washed out everything from our mind. So I told every student to be very calm when you are appearing for the paper. Very calm. If you find nothing in your mind, or your mind was like empty for any knowledge you have already, so be very calm and take a deep breath and look into and start the paper from where you understand, where I have a good understanding of the specific area. And once you have started your paper, you will be getting ideas in your mind how you are going to answer the question, because for the when you be in a pressure environment, you might not be able to perform well. So important thing is be very calm when you are answering to your questions. So the very first thing for your exam is time management. That's very important for you. Time management means your marks allocation between competition and discursive answers around 50-50%. So I have already told you guys that this paper is not specific for the calculation aspect. Your calculation techniques or your calculation skills were already tested by F7. This course doesn't based on your computation, so it's basically about how you can answer the question, the discursive discursive part of your question. That's the main area. That's something I have given you a rough idea, that discursive portion of your exam constitute 50% of the marks. But what I understand is, or in my understanding, I believe you have to give more importance to your discursive portion of your answer. But it doesn't mean that you have to ignore your computation portion or computation part of your answer altogether. Because once you're able to make the computations, only you are able to answer the discursive portion of your question. So you should not be considering yourself that you will be able to answer the discursive question only, or the discursive portion of the question paper, and you can ignore the computation part. So it's not going to happen. So you need to make a balance between two. Your computation purpose was widely tested by F7 paper. In this paper SBR, examiner is looking into if you are able to explain how the accounting has been done to the stakeholders groups, to give them an understanding how they can account for with all these adjustments you have made to the financial statements. So I would say over here, I have already mentioned the discovery's answer shares more score than computation. That's what my idea is. Hence, it's important to concentrate on discursive portion along with computation. So you should not be ignoring your computation aspect of your paper. Why? Because your discursive portion is basically based on your computation. If you are not able to make the computation, you are in no way you are able to make some discursive portion or answer to your discursive part of the question. So you need to be very careful. So time management is important. You need to allocate your time based on the scores available within your exam. You need to be very cautious how you are going to answer your question. So you need to consider, while you're answering a question, students cannot pass SBR exams by only working well in competition part, as I have already mentioned. So there are a lot many emphasis I find out that examiner comments are always focused on the discursive portion of your question. So there are few of the examiner comments those examiner has mentioned while he's reporting to the attempt of students on their exam preparation. So many students were able to produce consolidated financial statements, as I have mentioned earlier, because they have an idea of consolidated financial statements from F7. but they are not able to prepare explanatory notes. As I've already discussed, the discursive portion is something how you are going to prepare the explanatory notes to a specific situation of your exam or a specific adjustment you have made to your exam. So this discussion section is very important part. Ethical questions were fairly attempted. Examiner always look into it because students have a well diversified idea about how to account for those ethical issues, because I think all of the students have studied this ethical issues within multiple exam papers. Like in F1 you have gone through the major aspect of how those ethical issues would be appear in the paper. Then in F8 you have a recent idea, because F8 and F9 the audit paper, you have already audit and assurance paper, you have already looked into how those ethical issues have raised. So students are quite easy to appear or quite easy to answer. They find it easy to answer the ethical issues question, the second question. While performance on applying accounting standard conceptual framework was generally poor, because most of the students don't understand how accounting standards actually work. So in my presentation, I believe if today we have time, then I'll be giving you an idea how we can understand the ideology of accounting standards. So the basic idea of accounting standard was how we can account for those accounting standards. If we got time in today's presentation, most probably I'll be explaining you guys, to all of you, how we can understand the application of accounting standard, or how the accounting standard should be applied to a specific scenario, or how do we understand that if a scenario is given in a question, what accounting standard is specific with the application of that specific scenario. So that's another area that we'll be looking into it, and I hope that will help you guys within next upcoming days for your exam preparation, that how you can understand the application of accounting standard to a specific situation. So this area was very poor performance area, where students are not able to identify which specific accounting standard was applicable to a scenario. So in this session, I'll be trying to make sure that I'll give you a bit of idea how you can identify an accounting standard that is related to a specific situation. The examiner also reports that another concern is not many students are able to discuss current issues and interpretation. This is also a weak area. So you need to be very cautious about it. What are the current issues? Current issues I have already discussed, I have already said it. Current issues include all those aspects which are, if there are any inconsistencies within the accounting standard, or if there are any issues those were not dealt with an accounting standard. So you need a new accounting standard for the new situation altogether. For example, before IAS so current issues are most of the time applicable to your new situation those arises in the exam. I would say how you can understand that these new issues would be asked by you. So for example, I would say before IAS 41, the agricultural standard, there was no standard available how the accounting was done for agricultural assets or agricultural items, any item that was related to agriculture, specific to the agricultural assets. Fine. So at that point of time, if there is a company, if there is organization, if there is a business that is involved in agricultural asset, so that individual, that accountant would be required to account for those agricultural assets, but he would be making his own understanding and based on the conceptual framework. You might remember we have already discussed. So based on the criteria provided in the framework, the accountant is going to account for those agricultural assets until IAS 41 approaches in. Once IAS 41 is available to all the accounting standard and it's applicable, then the accountants are no more allowed to make their own adjustments based on their own understanding within the framework. So whenever there is an accounting standard available and there is a framework and it becomes a conflict between accounting standard and framework, the thumb rule in this situation is accounting standard always prevail. For example, I would glad to say it like in framework, it's always considered that you are not able to net off your assets and liabilities. You are never allowed by the framework. You can never net off assets and liabilities altogether. But if you are looking into IAS 12 taxation, deferred tax should always be provided as either a net balance, an asset or a liability, or in case of IFRS 9 financial instruments, if there are certain assets or liabilities which could be settled off at the same point in time, you can net off those assets and liabilities which was provided by IFRS 9 or IAS 12. So you should be, but as far as framework is concerned, framework is strictly prohibiting the individuals or the accountants from netting off assets or liabilities, which was mostly followed by all the accounting standard except these two, I would say, like IAS 12 taxation and IFRS 9 financial instruments. So whenever there is a specific situation comes in, or an accounting standard give you an idea how you should account for with a specific asset or liability or any element of financial statement, and framework provide a different guideline, so you should be leaving the guideline provided the framework. But being an accountant, I must follow what is the guideline provided by International Accounting Standard Board, so that always prevail. Interpretation is another important area that current issues, I hope we have a good understanding of current issues. So whenever the current issues questions comes in, you need to make sure, you need to ask yourself a question: how, if such situations comes in front of me, how this issue or how this existing accounting standard is conflicting with the rest of the accounting standard, or how this accounting standard is actually conflicting within the accounting standards of rest of all the standard. For example, I would say IAS 21. If you know, IAS 21 deals with three basic criteria. First one is how you can identify a functional currency and a presentation currency. So IAS 21 defines what is a functional currency and how you can identify it, and what is a presentation currency. So these are the two basic aspects, those was provided by IAS 21. Second criteria is individual foreign transactions, how you can account for within the individual foreign transactions. And there's a third portion of IAS 21 which gives you a detailed guidelines how foreign operations should be accounted for in consolidated financial statement, that we have just discussed before we are looking into the exam aspect. So what is the inconsistency within the accounting standard? You will see that IAS 21 recommends, if you are performing some individual financial transactions, you need to account for, you need to differentiate between the monetary items and the non-monetary items. Only you need to retranslate your monetary items whenever you are approaching a reporting date, and once those monetary items would be retranslated, I'm talking about not unsettled transaction, or those were still unsettled transaction at the reporting date. And for all those monetary items, if there is any foreign exchange gain or loss, that gain or loss should be reported in profit and loss account, right? But once IAS 21 moves to the foreign operations, the foreign subsidiary, so IAS 21 gives you a guidance that any foreign exchange gains or losses reported on foreign exchange should be reported in other comprehensive income rather than profit and loss account. Irrespective, IAS 21 give you a guidance how why those gain losses should be reported in other comprehensive income, not in profit and loss account. But still, it is a conflict. So we need to account for, we need to give advice to the examiner, we need to give an idea to the examiner how this inconsistency can be avoided within IAS 21. So that's something most of the time, sorry, this is something the examiner is going to always ask you about the current issues. So Those are the issues which would be identified within the accounting standards. Recently, you might have known that there is a new framework. The document was available for you guys, and I hope I have that document. Most probably I'm going to share that document with you guys later after the presentation. So you should be looking into that aspect of your exam. Interpretation is another area. So interpretation, in this case, most of the students, what I feel, they are interpreting the financial statement or interpreting the data given in the question based on their own understanding. But more specifically, examiner is sometimes asking you what is the impact of the changes you have made to the question to a specific group of stakeholders rather to all the stakeholders. In most of the time, student would be answering the question for all the stakeholders, not to a specific group. For example, if a company has accounted for a lease agreement into or a finance lease into an operating lease in case of a lessor, if accountant has accounted for a transaction which is a lease transaction, which was most of the time operator, it's a finance lease, but the accountant wrongly updated that lease as an operating lease. So what is the impact on the stakeholders? So if in a question examiner has asked you specific about the lenders of the business, so you must be interpreting how lenders of the business should be impacted. Rather you are answering it generally, that how this has impacted the stakeholders overall. I hope that makes sense. So if you are looking into the time management, if you are interpreting those adjustments for all the stakeholders, you are consuming your time for not the marks allocated to such an interpretation. So so whenever you are interpreting financial statements or a specific scenario, you must be very cautious that you are answering to that case scenario which is provided within the exam. I hope that's something pretty much clear for all of you. Next thing is, and one of the most important thing I have always seen whenever I ask the students to, I give them an assignment to give me an answer to a specific question, that is the linkage of one scenario to another scenario. Linkage is one of the most important feature in SBR exams. So what do you mean by linkage? Linkage means there are 2 or 3 scenarios given within the question. So most of the time, the first scenario most of the time relates to the third scenario of a question. If you have attempted the section 1, the A section of the question, and you have attempted the section B of the question, and then once you move to the section C, you must link that section C with section A. That's the linkage, a link you are going to create. I hope you understand. So you must be answering in a way that it's in continuity of section A, that section C is in continuity to section A. Over here in this example, I have made it pretty clear that an accounting issue is asked within question 3A. The more information is given to you for question 3B, and it's asked you to extend your discussion about the accounting issues in question 3A. Now, what most of the students do in the scenario, once they have answered question 3A, they never create a linkage between question 3A and 3B. So you must be explaining, as discussed in question 3A or as discussed in the above answer to question 3A, we have discussed this situation, and in this case we have to do these adjustments. I hope I'm pretty much clear. If you get an idea, even in this presentation, whenever I got a specific point, I always go back. For example, I have discussed about the question section, question number 4 in your or question number 3 in your exam, or question number 2 in your exam. I have discussed what section D So I have referred that portion that we have already discussed in the syllabus area. Section D is related to the consolidated section of financial statements. So that's the linkage. You need to create it. So you need to be very cautious and very careful when you are answering your question that you are creating a link. That linkage actually create a rhythm for the reader of your paper, or the person who is reviewing your paper or who is checking your paper. He would understand it, that how you have developed your answer, and he frankly speaking, he is going to enjoy your paper because you have created a story for which, if there is a story that creates a rhythm or an understanding, so everyone is very glad to read it. If there is a story given to you which has no linkage between, there is one sorry, there is one paragraph that's mentioning some other story and there is a B paragraph that is telling the story of another person, even you are not going to enjoy it and you're not going to read it. So make your paper a very compact paper for the reader, for the examiner. So once he is reading out your answer, he'll be enjoying, he'll understanding what you are saying. I hope I'm making a connection between these two. So linkage is really important. So what we do in this case, the sub requirement is better to be answered after the first question you have answered. So this is another a great idea. So student did some sort of mistake. They're answering question 3B first, and then they are going to answer in their paper question 3A. That's something, you have changed the structure of your paper, what examiner wants from you. So you need to be very careful. You should be answering the question in a way examiner wants you to answer. That's no hard and fast rule that you are always going to answer the question from starting from question 1 till question 4. Whatever question you feel is about which you are quite comfortable and you can answer it well, make sure you are answering that question on the very first place. But once you're looking into the requirements of the question, you need to make sure the question was developed by the examiner in a way that you're supposed to answer 3A first, then 3B, and then 3C, for example. That's the case in this situation. But it's not always the case. If you don't find any linkage between the question 3A and 3B, then it's up to you. You can perform 3B first, and then you can go back, or you come back to question 3A again. But important thing is, if you find out once you are reading your question paper, I have told you earlier that you are provided with 15 marks time frame for which that's a reading time for you guys. So once you have identified a linkage within the question, so you need to be very cautious about it. Yes, that's a question for which I myself would be considering that I have to answer 3A first and then 3B. Because if I am not able, if I've not answered 3A, then it's not possible for me to answer 3B, because there is a link created by your examiner, right? So as the exam structure is disclosed, I suggest you to plan how to answer in a final preparation. Probably answering question 1 first and then question 2 followed by the question 3 and 4 is most suitable to your study, but it's not for you. As I've earlier mentioned, that it could be possible that one of your fellow student or one of your friend is quite comfortable with answering question 1 first, then question 2, then question 3, and then question 4, but it's not for you. You might not feel it more comfortable in answering question 1 first. You might be more comfortable in answering question 4 first. So you should be making it sure. But once this linkage comes in, this linkage is within the question, and you need to create that linkage, right? Next thing is, an important thing is, I am pretty sure everyone is aware of the new situation that nowadays you are required to appear for a CBE paper, a CBE home-based paper, right? It's a remote CBE paper, and you guys would be appearing in your exam from your homes because of COVID-19 situation. So this situation is, I believe, most of you students, if those have appeared in the previous paper, so it's not something new for the students, except a situation that F7 paper includes, or all the skill level paper includes, you can say MCQs and MTQs, and they also include CRQs. SBR exam is always a CRQ, you can say it easily. So it's bit chain paper for you guys. So you, all of you must have very good Excel and PowerPoint skills for appearing, for preparing these papers. I won't say extraordinary skills, I would say good skills. So you can easily answer your question. For example, your typing speed should be good. So as you have an understanding in your mind, but you don't have a pen and a paper to write those answers within your answer book. So now you're supposed to type your answer within the Excel and the Word sheet, right? I was reviewing few of the question, and one of the student have asked me that is is he allowed to either opt for an Excel file or a power or a Word file? I would recommend that individual who have asked the question to go through the practice sessions, the practice papers, the practice CBE provided by ACCA on its website. You'll get a better understanding. But as far as this session is concerned, we are looking into that aspect as well, how we are going to use the Excel file and the Word file inculcated within the exam. So that's something I have also suggested to ACCA, that ACCA might be providing two sheets, either an Excel sheet or Word sheet, and it allows the student to use, it's depending upon the student discretion, whichever sheet he is going to use, either an Excel sheet or a Word sheet. But as far as current CBE environment is concerned, you will be provided a sheet. If there is a question which requires both calculation aspect and discursive aspect, then you will be provided both sheets. A computation, for computation part, you'd be provided an Excel sheet, and for discursive answer, you'd be provided with the Word sheet, right? So that's the approach of your question. If there is any question, do let me know. We have you always have a practice mock exams on your ACC website, so I would recommend everyone to go there and start understanding how that environment actually works, right? So we'll be taking a 10 minutes break, everyone. uh, After 10 minutes we'll be joining back, and I'll try to make sure that we'll be looking into the practice section, how that exam, CBE exam actually works. So I'll be looking into those aspects after this session, and we'll be understanding how that environment actually works and how we need to answer, or how we're going to use that specific environment. That's really important for you. Rather, all of you will be understanding your exam environment within your exam, or on the exam day. It's better to understand the exam environment before that, right? So after 10 minutes break, we'll be coming back and we'll be understanding how that exam environment actually works, and we'll be looking into it in more detail. And I'll be very glad to answer your question if there is anyone. Yes, someone has asked a question that computation needs to be done in Excel sheet, and description question will be in a Word sheet. So it's not like specific to the student. It's on student's discretion. If you are provided with both the sheets, an Excel sheet and a Word sheet, if you find yourself more comfortable with while answering your question in Excel file, I would say it's fine to answer it. But as far as exam pattern is concerned, exam focus is concerned, you are supposed to answer that descriptive question, that discursive question within the Word sheet rather in Excel sheet. So after the break, I'll be back in 10 minutes, and we'll be looking into the exam environment. Okay, we'll be back in 10 minutes. Okay, welcome back everyone. I hope all of you are aware of that CBE environment. This is CBE platform support, where you can find out how to access your exams. So if you're looking into exam, this is login to your practice platform. So you can approach your practice platform here. I would recommend every student to go through once to this practice platform, so you should not be finding any problem within your exam. So once you're clicking in this on this portion on this link, you'll be getting a new window open for you, which is sign into my ACCA, and then you have to sign into my ACCA. Once you have signed it, you will be opening up this practice environment for you, which is a test reach environment or CBE practice platform. This is how you'll be appearing, this practice platform will be appearing in your exam session. So you can look into self assigned material. I would recommend that's not the case that should be done. So over here you have papers for you available, so you can select your paper. Suppose I have already selected SBR International Specimen 1, but you don't have that section available within your practice platform if you have not approached it earlier, right? So you don't have this specific section, so you can select from here. It's strategic business reporting paper. It's a blank workspace international. So if you are appearing for SBR International, so you must be selecting this, and ACCA official resources. You can either took a past exam, or you can look into specimen exam papers. Suppose I'll be selecting this one. So you have SBR International December, SBR International March and June 19, and SBR International September 18. You can look into any of this assigned paper, or you can look into this specimen papers. You have available two specimen papers. I have already assigned myself this paper, so this is appearing up in this section. Suppose I'm going to unassign this one, and you will see I don't have any section available here. Once I need to assign that specific paper to me, then that's appearing in this window over here. So now you can select from here. So once you have selected it, I would say I'm going to unassign it. I'm going to assign some other paper, this December 2018 paper. So this is the paper you have actually selected. You can start the paper from here. So once you have clicked your paper to start, you'll be provided with some exam introduction and some of the guidelines to your exam paper, right? You have this next button available, and I would be recommending everyone to go through this exercise once, at least once, before appearing in the exam. The same environment you'll be finding out within your exam aspect, rather in this that's something within specimen paper. It's the same environment that will be you are going to that will be shown up in your section. So you need to click this next. In this next, you have certain instructions available: general instructions, workplace instructions. This is something that give you a guidance about how you can appear in your paper. So I would recommend everyone, if you have not appeared for this, so don't just go through all these uh, next options. So you must be reading out these. Your exam consists of number of questions. Each questions present in workspace. Each workspace includes introductory information of each question, exhibits, requirements, and response. These are the four main heads. Those are available within your workspace section. Then you need to select the exhibit requirements, and response option will display in the window, which can be moved and resized as required. You can close each window individually or close all the windows at once by selecting this section, close all section. You might have available that close section on the top of the toolbar. Any answer you have entered into the response option will be saved automatically, and you can reopen that sheet whenever you want to. So that's not going to change. The sheet is not going to change. That will remain same. Once you have entered something into the sheet, that is automatically saved. So there is a splitter bar which can be moved to see more or less left to right side of the screen as required. Whatever you require, if you want to move the screen from left to right, you can easily move it. You can highlight or strike through text in your introductory information exhibits or requirements by selecting this highlighter or strike through. So how this function works, once you are in your paper-based exams, you might be highlighting the specific area of your exam paper, the paper section which you were attempting to, and which you need to find out, or which you think that it's important part and from where you are going to start your answer. So you must be highlighting that area. You can copy and paste between exhibits, requirements, and response options by using Control-C for copy and Control-V, a shortcut key for paste. Then you can move to the next one. There are further navigation buttons. This is provided. These are the navigation buttons, this, next, and previous in the first attempt. Then you can hide or restore a display by selecting this option, the computer option, the screen option. You can revisit a question and change your answer at any time during the exam session. Once your exam session ends, then you're not able to access your exam. It's already submitted to ACCA. Flag or review, if you wish to revisit or retrieve, you can flag or click a flag or a review to that specific question or a requirement. Click the button again to remove that flag and space. This is the button. You can either flag a requirement of a question, or you can highlight that question for your review at the end of the exam session, or at any point after you have flagged it out or reviewed it out. You can also click the help button, a copy of these exam instructions, help and guidance in the workplace. So anytime you want to reassess during your exam what is the shortcut key, or what is the navigation button and how it works, you can go back to the help button to find out how you can access your exam environment. A copy of these exam instructions, help and guidance in the workplace, formula sheets, tax tables, if it's F6, so you can find out the text tables or formula sheets from that help section, right? These are the buttons that would be appear based on the exam that was there. So you also have to access the calculator. So when you are using a calculator, you would be provided an on-screen calculator, a standard scientific calculator by selecting this calculator option. Note that in the live exam, you're also permitted to use your own calculator, provided it does not have a facility to store or display text. You have two options available. Either you have your own calculator, or you can use a scientific or exam calculator by selecting these two options. So it's possible for you. Next, working in Scratchpad, how you can use the Scratchpad. Scratchpad is most of the time used for your rough workings or notes, whatever you want to add. Important thing is you are not provided with the scrap paper within your exam. It's not allowed within your remote home-based exams, right? So you should be very careful why you're supposed to use a scrap pad. You must not be using a scrap paper within your exam. It's strictly prohibited by ACCA. So you should not be using that scrap paper. It's not allowed. The scrap pad retains all the notes or workings entered in all the working spaces, and they are available during the exam duration. They will be not submitted for marking after the live exam. So this scrap paper is not submitted to the exam team for marking. So you need to make sure if you have entered any notes or anything onto the scrap pad, and you think that this idea or that thing that you have mentioned in your scrap pad should be in your exam for review purpose, so you must be mentioning those items or copy and paste those specific sections of your workings into your Excel sheet or the Word sheet, so the examiner can review it. You will also be provided with a paper of notes workings for live exam. You should prefer to use it. They will be not submitted for marking. It will not be collected at the end of the exam sessions and not be removed from the exam room. This is for those exams, those will be conducted or at the exam centers. The notes and workings entered onto the scrap pad or working paper during live exam will not be marked. You should be very careful if you have mentioned anything. Again, I'm emphasizing on it. Why? Because you should be careful while answering a question that if you have mentioned something on a scratch pad, it will never be submitted for marking, right? If you want to the marker to see the notes and workings of question requirement in the live exam, you must show them within the relevant response option, and the relevant response options we'll be looking into this session later what those response sections would be. Those response sections includes both the Excel sheet or the Word sheet, not the scrap pad, right? Scratch pad is not involved. You can add a selection of currency and symbols, answer question like this dollar symbol from on the top toolbar using those currency options. And navigator screen, navigator can be accessed at any time during the exam. Selecting this navigator means you can move between the sheets you are provided with. The screen allows you to jump to any question or number in exam. This navigator actually helps you helps you in moving from one question to another without looking or without moving next or previous. It also allows you to see the status of each question and whether it has been reviewed, attempted, or flagged or reviewed. So this navigator is going to help you a lot. So next thing is, this section is reviewing the exam. You can review exam once you have attempted or attempted any or all the questions through this navigation. Last question exam, click the next to take this takes you to the item review screen. Item review screen, how this item review screen is going to help you a lot. This screen gives you a final opportunity to see the flag and attempted status of each question and review your answer before you exit the exam, right? You can select individual questions you wish to revisit or quickly access groups of questions from the items review screens. During the exam review period, navigator is not available. However, you can navigate to the question by selecting next or previous or review screen. When reviewing question, you can change your answer and click a review screen to view any updated status of an item review screen. Ending the exam, once you have completed your item review and wish to finally end the exam, you need to hit this button. So you need to be very careful. You should not be hitting this end exam button. And for this, I would recommend don't use this previous and next mostly, because if you have mistakenly hit this end exam button, your exam is no more. It will end it up, right? So if you want to navigate, so you should be using the navigator rather this previous and next buttons. Once you ended the exam, you cannot revisit any of the question. Your answer will then be available for marking and review. So that's the idea of your exam. So important notes and the differences of functionality between CBE practice platform and the live exam. What is the main difference between CBE practice platform and the live practice platform is the PDF exhibits that you are looking into CBE practice platform is slightly different. So you'll be looking into these options in your PDF file where you find out your questions, different questions. Selecting text in the PDF exhibit within your CBE platform, you'll be immediately selecting in PDF exhibits, either highlight it or stick through or copy it. In live exam, you cannot immediately select the text. You need to switch from move tool, this move tool, to this tool in order to be able to select the text. This is illustrated below. So exam PDF, you can move and select this option. While in this option, options are same, but by default this was selected. So you need to be looking into these options. This is not something very technical point. It would be easily understandable. Once the text box is selected in the live exam, you will be able to select the text in the PDF exhibit. This select option should be clicked to make sure that you can select the text available. Then display of selected text in a PDF exhibit. This is the display that appears within your exam. This exhibit is appearing in your exam when in CBE platform, while this would be appearing in your exam section. Find tool in PDF text. This is the find tool that is available in your live exam, while in CBE practice platform you'll be finding this find tool in your exam paper, right? And selection to move exam summary screen. I'm looking into the next exam summary. Time allotted. This is the time. The exam time is not. This exam is not timed. This specimen exam, CBE platform specimen exam, is not timed. This exam is divided into two sections. Section A, 2 questions worth 50 in total. Section B, 2 questions each worth 25 marks, 50 marks in total. As we have discussed in our presentation, that section A would be assigned with 50 marks, but examiner has not mentioned how many marks the examiner is going to assign to question 1 and question 2 in section A. So it is possible that question 1 in section A might totals 30 scores in total, and question 2 in section A totals 20 marks, while in section B every question worth 25 marks, right? So next thing is all the questions are compulsory and you need to select the next to start your exam. So I'm going to hit this next button in a way to start my exam. So this option would appear to every one of you. So you need to make sure how we can resolve it. We can just scroll it down till the end. These are some of the guidelines provided by ACCA. So you need to look into these guidelines. You can read it out if you want to. Otherwise, if you are hitting right now this next button, it will automatically give you, if you are ready to begin your exam, please click yes. If you are not ready to begin your exam, please click no. So I would I'm ready right now to appear in to enter into my exam. So I'm hitting yes button. So this is the option you are getting. This section of exam contains 2 questions. The exam section worth 50 in total. If your live exam, you should indicate which requirement each of your response relate to, so that this is clear for the markers. Important aspect is, whenever you are entering your answer within the exam section, sorry, you must be mentioning which requirement are you answering. I'll be giving you a demo how we are going to account it for. So show all the notes and workings that you want the marker to see within your response. Remember, any notes workings made on a scratch pad or any workings paper will not be marked. We are going to select next to continue this with the paper. So I'm going to start my paper. You have seen this is the main body of your exam section. So these are the exhibits where you find out your requirements. These are the requirements. You can copy those requirements. You can paste those requirements. So this is something you have found out in your exam. This is the question. The following extracts of consolidated financial statements of Moise Group is as follows, and this is the main question. If you want to look into the requirements, you need to hit this button, right? So once you have hit this button, you have found out the requirements mentioned within your exam. So I would be looking into those requirements. Draft an explanatory note on directors of Moise companies, which should include, you need to draft an explanatory note, a calculation of cash generated from operation using indirect method. This is a cash flow related question. An explanation of the specific adjustment requirement to the group profit before tax for calculate cash generated from operations. So I need to look into this requirement. This is statement of profit and loss account, and this is balance sheet. So I can develop cash flow statements from the requirement number 1. So you have notes to the financial statements. These notes to the financial statements are actually related to, if I'm looking into this section, these are related to these adjustments you can make, right? So the following information is relevant to 30th September 2008. This is pension schemes model. It's a goodwill. It's a property, plant and equipment related question. This is inventory related portion, and that's the whole notes of financial statement. You can see changes in group structure. So you can mention over here, these are the changes in group structure during the year ended. These are the changes, those are made to the subsidiary. And last one is discontinued operation. If there are any discontinued operation, you can look into all these discontinued operations. Now, as I have opened all those requirements, how I can account for with all these requirements, we have a section, we can cross it or we can hit this button to close all the items. So this is the main requirement of your question, and if you want to review any of your requirement, again you can hit this button. And if you think that I need to highlight, I have these 3 items, I want to highlight this profit before tax value, so I can click this one and hit this highlighted button. You can see this section is highlighted because this is important for me and I want to review this specific portion of my question to find out what and how I'm going to answer the question. If you think you have studied this one and this line you don't need in your future exam, in your future calculation, you can remove it by making this strike through button to make sure that this is something I have already read out and that's not something I need to account it for. If you want to remove this strike through button, you need to select the line once again and hit this button again, and it's automatically removed. The strike through line was already removed. And if you want to remove this highlighting option, you can just click and remove highlighting. You have no more highlighted this specific section of your paper. Right now, the next thing is, if you want to develop your answer, suppose it's requirement number 1, you're looking into the requirement and you want to answer your requirement number 1, cash flows generated from operation using the indirect method. So you have to hit this word processing button, the word processing sheet, or the spreadsheet. As this requirement A is related to the calculation aspect, then you're supposed to make those calculations within this spreadsheet. You can see this spreadsheet has very limited options available, right? So you should be making sure that if you want to use any shortcut key, or if you have you think you are able to apply those shortcut keys within the Excel sheet, you need to remember those shortcut keys within this Excel sheet. You can apply those formulas, but this section is very limited. If I'm going to show you the Excel sheet, suppose this is the Excel sheet, so you have many options available here. I hope my screen is visible to everyone. You have multiple options over here in your Excel environment, but in case of your exam section, you have very smaller number of exam questions available in this section. So you can make your answer within this Excel sheet and save. Once you made, suppose, any adjustment, you can it was automatically saved. So important thing is that I was going to discuss it. You need to mention it's question number 1 and it's requirement 1. This is answer to requirement number 1. So I'm going to answer this requirement number 1, and even in requirement number 1, it's the first option, requirement A. Suppose it's requirement A, requirement A, and even in requirement A, you are answering the first one option, right? And you might need to highlight it. You can click this highlight and then start your answer. This will give examiner an idea this answer is related to which specific requirement. This will help the examiner. So one more thing I'll be giving you an understanding. If you are helping the examiner to help him out, how easily he can give you the score, he can understand your answer, he'll be giving you the good marks. So that's very important. You need to make sure you are giving an examiner a clear-cut indication, a clear-cut idea what I'm doing and how I'm going to answer it. I hope you recall something from the last hour of our presentation, of my presentation. I have discussed about linkage. You're supposed to create a story that the reader of your answer would be involved in it. He get involved into it, what you have developed or the answer you have developed. So whenever you're going to help out your examiner in understanding your answer, he will be giving you score, he will be in good scores, right? So these things should be considered very cautiously, and along with it, this specific thing I would say, or what you are doing, will help you to secure the professional marks as well. This is something, being a professional, once you would be in your practical life and you'll be preparing the financial statements and you're developing the notes of the financial statement, you are actually communicating with your stakeholders, so that you'll be telling your stakeholders indirectly what you have done. Right? So if within the exam, if you are in a position to convince your examiner what you have mentioned in your exam, it would be very easy for the examiner to give you good scores. So you need to be very cautious when you are answering a question, answer to your any requirement of your question. So I hope this is something you have understood. So that's something I would say. I have looked into all the requirements, this requirement actually scores 12 marks, and these are the rest of the requirements. I'd be better to answer all of these requirements. This is something, the scores I mentioned. I'll be looking into all these wordings those are mentioned: draft and explanatory notes, calculation and explanation, what these specific wordings mean. So we'll be coming back to our presentation and we're looking into all these words, these adverbs, how this specific wordings means to us, and how we are going to develop our answer based on these specific wordings, right? I'm moving to the next question for right now. So if you have opened like multiple options, I'll show you. We have opened 5 files actually. This is the navigator button. You can see this is something, it's question number 1 you have attempted, and you want to look into this question. You can just click this one and all the windows will disappeared, and you can straight away jump to this question number 1. If you want to look into question number 2, you can hit this question number 2 button and you will find out the requirements of question number 2. This is the question which is related to financial statement extracts, and these are the financial statement extracts. You find out this criteria. You have Hallam property. I have not read out the requirement of this question because we have the practice session available. We have multiple questions I have selected for attempting the question. So that's something I have mentioned within this session. So I'm not going through the requirements of all of these questions. So I'm just opening up the requirement to make sure we are understanding what ends up with this requirement. So in any of the question, I'll be intentionally leaving one or two sections. So discuss how Hallam property should be accounted for and explain the implications for the financial statements and the debt covenants. You can see here, we have just discussed within presentation that once it's asking about the interpretation of financial statement, it will give you a guideline which specific stakeholder is required, or for what specific stakeholder you will be providing these guidelines. You can see here, and the debt covenants of Fickerson company, and that's something, a debt covenants for the lenders of the business. You must be interpreting those financial statements with respect to the lenders, rather any other stakeholder, not the shareholders, not the employees, not the government, not the you can see customers or the suppliers. It should be specific to the debt covenants, the lenders of the business, the lenders who have lent out the long-term loans to the business, right? Second is this is another requirement which is related to IFRS 15 and ethical issues. You need to make sure there is something that the director might have asked the accountants to perform, but the examiner might have, or the accountant might have refused it based on the accounting requirement. Important thing is here you don't find an Excel sheet, right? Because all of these requirements are basically discuss and explain, rather calculate anything, or rather to provide for what is the impact. If you're looking into the previous question, I'll be moving to the previous question. This question number 1, you can see the requirements: draft and explanatory note, directors moyes for a calculation of cash flows. You can see as calculation is involved, so that's why a spreadsheet was given in the question. While in question number 2, in this question number 2, if you're looking into this aspect, I have intentionally, I'm not going to open this word processing sheet intentionally. Why? I'll be telling you in some later stage, right? So if you think I want to add something I have not attempted, question number 2, suppose I am mentioning I need to response, I need to add response for question 2 later, right? This is something I have already added up, right? You can cut paste anything, or you can mention anything within this paper as you want to, but once you have closed it out and once you're going to open it, it's already there. It's not removed until and unless you're going to remove it, and then you can cross it. Now you'll find out nothing is mentioned over here, right? And if you use a shortcut key, that's Control Z and undo option, it will automatically be updated here, right? So that's something you can do for your paper. So you're not supposed to hit Control S, a save button. It's automatically saved once you are entering something within your scratch pad. It's automatically saved within that section. So I have added one note here. I would say it's note number 1, and I'll be reviewing it again at some later point, right? Okay, so I'm going to close this one and I'm moving to the next question, and then we're moving to the navigator. So this is section B. There are guidelines provided for you within section B, and it will give you some idea how you can account it for. So I'm jumping to the question number 3. This is coal inventory related question. This is the first portion of your question. Then we have second, property, plant and equipment reconditioning cost. I'm not going to open this reconditioning cost. I'll be telling you later how I can identify which portion of the paper I have not mentioned it. So the theta mine is given in this question. I have reviewed this requirement, and then sorry, I have reviewed this data of the question, exhibits of the question, and I'm looking into the requirement. This is a 25 marks question in which you're supposed to advise the director of fill company how the following should be dealt with. You can see here in this scenario, the question, the examiner of SBR is asking you to provide how the accounting standard should be applied to these specific situations. We have already discussed the paper, the pattern of the paper, examiner requirements of what is in the mind of the examiner, how examiner is going to test you. One is whether the conceptual framework 2018, you can see I have already mentioned that there is a new conceptual framework available for you, which is conceptual framework 2018, a new document, affects on the valuation of inventories and how to calculate the net realizable value of the coal inventory, including low quality coal. Then how to treat the property, plant and equipment reconditioning cost, and whether the decline in the price of the coal is an impairment indicator or not. So IAS 16 and IAS 36, impairment and IAS 16. So you need to apply both of these two standards all together. In this case, you're supposed to apply IAS 2 inventories along with the framework, conceptual framework requirements, the new conceptual framework requirement. Whether the conceptual framework 2018 will affect the decision as to whether fill-in company controls the mine, and whether the acquisition of the interest would be considered as a business combination under IFRS 3, this theta mine, right? Philco also jointly controls coal mines with other entities. Theta mine is owned by 4 participants. Phil company owns 28%, and the other 3 participants each own 24% of the mine. The operating agreements requires many major decisions to be approved by parties representing 72% of the interest in the mine. Phil company is considering to purchase one of the participant interest in 24%. So this specific section, this specific requirement is basically related to IFRS 12, the joint arrangements, right? I hope you have gone through this requirement. And right now, I'm going to open this word processing requirement, and I'm going to answer question number 3, and it's requirement number 1A. I believe requirement 1A, right? It's requirement 1A. Oh yeah, it's requirement 1A. Or it's just A? No, it's requirement A, B, and C. There are 3 basic requirements. So I would say it's requirement number A. I'm going to answer it. And you can like bold these 2 so that examiner will understand that this specific requirement is related to question number 3. And I'm not going to hit Control S button here. I'm going to just cross it, and I want to look into it where my answer response was saved here. So it's automatically saved, right? So you don't need to worry about it that if you have not hit a Control S button, once you are entering any single line within the Word or Excel file, it would be automatically saved within your answer response or response option, right? So I'm going to close this one. I'm moving to the next question, and for this question I'll be looking into this tax rate reconciliation requirement. The director of holds company, I'm not looking into the detailed requirement for this specific scenario. There are few of the question requirement. I believe this is related to some deferred tax calculation, tax rate and deferred tax calculation. This is tax rate applicable and deferred tax calculation idea was provided in this scenario, and I'm looking into the requirements of this question. So they are basically 3 requirements of this question. Question number A, the IFRS practice statement management commentary provides a board not binding framework for presentation of financial statements and all these requirements. This is A1. Discuss briefly the arguments for and against issuing the IFRS practice statement management commentary as non-binding framework or as an IFRS standard. So that's related to some non-financial performance indicators or non-financial reporting within your financial statement, whether it's required by International Accounting Standard Board or a framework or is binding or not. So that's the criteria. Second is discuss how qualitative characteristics of understandability, relevance, and comparability should be applied to the presentation of management commentary. Now, if you would be looking into it, you can easily identify, yes, the framework guidelines are binding for the management commentary. If you can link those things, we have already discussed the linkage. So even in this question, I'm just giving you an idea for what we have already discussed. So if you look into it, this is one question where the examiner is asking you whether the practice statement or management commentary is as a non-binding framework if the requirements of framework doesn't apply to the specific scenario, and in very next requirement it mentions how these requirements of the framework are applicable to the management commentary, right? So linkage, you can always create a linkage in this question. Once you need to answer question 4A1 and then you can answer 4A2, right? So next question is, with reference to the above information, explain to the investors the nature of accounting for taxation and financial statements. Investors could be the shareholders, could be the lenders of the business, those who want to invest within the business. So note, your answer should explain the tax reconciliation. You need to calculate the current tax and the deferred tax reconciliation, discuss the implications of current and future tax rates, and provide an explanation of accounting to for deferred tax in accordance with the relevant IFRS. There are professional marks in this question 4B for clarity and quality of discussion. One more thing, in this scenario, you'll be provided with two sheets, word processing sheet and a spreadsheet, right? With respect to explain the investor, and I believe we have some calculation aspect in this requirement as well, which I believe is here. With reference to the above information, explain to the investor the nature of accounting for taxation financial statement. Your answer should explain the reconciliation. This tax reconciliation is a calculation aspect, and for this calculation aspect you would be provided with the spreadsheet. So once you are entering into the spreadsheet, you must be answering in a way, and you can see for this question we have already opened our word processing sheets, one word processor and spreadsheet, and we have entered certain data points within the word processor and the spreadsheet, but it's not appearing in this section because this word processor sheet, the word processor and spreadsheet is related to question number 4 only. It's not related to any other question, right? So I'm going to enter an answer here for this question number B. For example, I'll be looking into its question number 4. Question 4, and this is a requirement. I believe it's requirement. Oh, sorry. I believe it's requirement B, and I'm going to answer this requirement B over here, right? And I'm going to close this one, requirement number B, right? Requirement B, I'm going to answer this requirement B over here, and then requirement B, right? So this is something your answer would be in this way. So I'm going to close everything over here, and I'm going to hit the next button in this scenario. So in this next button, you have a complete review of your question. In section A, you have attempted question number 1, but in section A, question number 2 was not attempted. Why it's not attempted? If you can look into review not attempted. Now I'm going to tell you why it's not. If I'm going to click this navigator, you can easily find out this question was not attempted. Why? Even you look into it, I have not opened this word processing sheet, right? So I have opened it up, and now I can enter any question 2. It's I'm going to answer requirement A, and then I'm going to close it. Now you'll be looking into navigator and it shows you that question number 2 is tempted, right? And if you want to flag it or review it, you can easily, even from this navigator, you can make sure, yes, okay, I have already attempted it, but I have not flagged it. And once you have opened your word processing sheet and you have mentioned something in it, it will show the status of that question as attempted, right? So if there is any portion of the question that was left behind, you can either flag it or review it from this portion, right, from this navigator, or you can flag or you can flag it, or you can review it like this question. You can even hit this flag from here as well, right? So you have multiple options with you to make sure that whatever you have, either you have flagged it or not. And then you have this scratch pad available to make sure that I need to add response for question number 2. You can look into it. We have intentionally, I have left this question number 2, right? So that's something you need to be make sure. This is the calculator available to you. So you have two options available, either a standard calculator or a scientific calculator. You can use this calculator if you want to, or if you think that you need to use your own calculator with an exam, it's fine, don't use these two things. But the calculator was allowed, but you need to make sure that calculator don't have a capacity to store something within it, which is something within your center based exam that was strictly prohibited. You have these symbols available if you have word processing sheet. Suppose I'm going to add these symbols here, so you can add. There are basically these 4 or 5 currencies available, and most of the time you'll be finding out the currency which was mentioned in your exam. So you can hit this currency button and you can hit this insert. You'll find out that there is a currency available in your answer sheet. So that's how you can use your answer sheet within the exam. So now I'm going to hit all of these buttons, and you want that I'll be reviewing those flag question. I'm going to remove this flag. Irrespective, if you have not even removed the flag, you can submit that question. So I'm looking into this one, and I want review not attempted. That's really important. Review not attempted. If you hit it, then you have already attempted every question. You can remove the flag of any question or section from here as well. And if you want to review all, you can review these items. Important thing is ACCA has made sure that you might not be mistakenly end your exam. The end exam button was on the left side of your screen, right? So while looking into the whole scenario, we don't find out that we don't find any option on this side, right? So that's something, a good idea for you, is to make sure that we have not made any mistake in it. Where we can we download PPT presentation and questions. I'll be sharing those with you guys. Most of the time this is a question from someone that if those shortcut keys are available for you or not. Most of the time those shortcut keys doesn't work for you, right? Only those shortcut keys works in this section for you, which were available for you. For example, if I'm looking into this section, and also section, not the section, I'm looking into question number 1, and we have both word processing sheet. So most of the time these shortcut keys work, which are available here. Rest of the shortcut keys most of the time doesn't work. For example, if I've entered something in it, I'm going to mention this Control Z. So this undo button is there, so these shortcut keys work. For example, just giving you an idea, I'm even looking into the word processing sheet. I'm opening this word processing sheet, and I'm going to add 2, 3, 5, 6, and I'm going to add a shortcut key here. So it's not working, right? Most of the time for sum button, you shortcut key normally you're going to use is alt and equal button that give you a sum, but within this Excel sheet it's not working, right? So all the shortcut keys you have to remember from these options. If you have any additional shortcut key that you recalled in your mind and you want to apply in your exam, it doesn't work. Only shortcut keys works for the options available within your exam. No other shortcut key is working, right? I hope answer to the question was done for the individual who has mentioned it. Calculation can be done using spreadsheet by adding formulas. I believe yes, you can make calculation using the formulas. For example, if I want to calculate the present value formula, let me check equals. Yes, I believe yes, you can. It's 1 plus, oh sorry, 1 divided by, I'm just using a present value, 1 plus r is 10%, and its formula is raised to the power 2. So second year, so this is the annuity factor that was provided to you, right? So if you want to make sure they are moving it to two decimal places, so 0.83, yes, formulas actually works, right? So you should not worry about it, that how these formulas actually works. These formulas actually works for you, and you should not be worry about these formulas actually works, and you need to hit this one. This is something, this formula works. Is it clear? Or if there is still a question, formulas actually works, but shortcut keys, all the shortcut keys doesn't work. Only shortcut keys for these available functions only works within the spreadsheet. Rest, no other shortcut keys actually works. So if there is any other question, do let me know with respect to this CBE exam practice. So I'll be happy to answer you. And once you are done with all these things and you want to answer, you give me a second. I believe I need to move into question number 4. There is one more thing. This is review screen and this is help screen. We have discussed about the help screen. So these are the exam instructions given to you, and most of the time if you want to look into it, which page you want to jump, so you can click this button and you can move to that specific, these are linked actually. And if you feel like I have jumped to the page number 2, and how these windows actually works, all of those instructions, those are provided in the very in the very start of your exam. Those are already available for you guys, and if you want to move back to the top, you can move to this first page. So these are the shortcut keys, those actually works. This is workplace help and this is exam instructions. So if you want to look into the exam instructions, you can look into those exam instructions as well from this help button, right? Any question as of now? And once you are done with your exam, you just need to hit this end exam button, and there is a pop-up opened up. You have chosen to end the exam. If you continue, you will not be able to return to the exam. And are you sure you want to end the exam? I would hit this yes button, and there's once again another pop-up comes up, which actually confirms to make sure that student has intentionally ended his exam, rather by mistake the exam was submitted. So once you need to hit this button, your exam is now completed and your response is available for marking review. There's something you will find out, and then you need to hit this exit button, so your exam environment would be ended up. And once again in practice platform, you comes up in this situation right? If there is any question right now, I believe no one else has any question. So I hope everyone has a good idea about how this exam environment works, but this is something I have performed. I recommend all of you to go through this exam environment once, right? Try to attempt one paper from this practice platform, and then we'll be looking into it. You will identify what are the actual shortcomings that you find out within your exam session, right? If anyone has any question as of now up to this point, I'll be glad to answer your questions. Then after a 10 minutes break again, we'll be back and look into the exam tips, the common question verbs that was most of the time used in your exam question, and we'll be looking into it. What are the main requirements of what are the main requirements and how those verbs actually impact your answer to a question. So we'll be just quickly going through all of those verbs, and then I'll be looking into some useful links, and most probably I'll be sharing few of the items with you. Specifically, I have listened from many of the students that they might not have looked into those, I would say, the examinable documents page, and I'll be looking into those examinable documents, this SBR examinable documents portion. Most of the students have not looked into it, so I'll be looking into these as well. But after a 10-minute break, we'll be back and we'll be looking into the common question verbs and understand how these verbs actually impact our answer and what actually examiner is expecting from us. I hope you guys might have gone through these verbs more often before within your skill level exam, because from F5 to F9 you would be looking into what examiner is actually asking you within your CRQs. So we'll be looking after 10 minutes break. We'll be back in 10 minutes, and if you guys have any question, any one of you, then do let me know. I'll be looking at your questions first, and then we'll be looking into common verbs, and then move on to the rest of the presentation. So we'll be back in 10 minutes, right? Okay, welcome back everyone. We'll be looking into SBR, some common question verbs and what these verbs actually mean and how we need to construct our answer when we look into those exam verbs. So every time I'll be doing some sort of question with you guys from tomorrow onward. I'll be always explaining you how these specific verbs impact us and how we are going to construct our answer with specific requirement of these common verbs. So these are first verb that was mentioned here is analyze. Analyze actually means you need to break into separate parts and discuss, examine, and interpret each part of the question given in the scenario. You need to make sure what is the current situation and what happened if the situation was changed. If there is something, analyze the impact of the changes you have made to a scenario and interpret it. So you need to make sure you are completely analyzing it. You need to separate each portion of your question and you need to be discussing each part of your question with respect to requirements of the examiner, and make sure you are applying all the aspects of what you have understood from the scenario of the question. Second verb is apply. Apply actually means to put into action prudently or relevantly, properly apply the scenario or case. It's more or less apply and analyze is pretty much close, but in apply scenario, you only need to apply specific guidelines provided by the examiner to the scenario. When the examiner is going to ask you assess means you need to judge the worth or importance of something or a quality of something within that specific scenario, how it is important, what are the strengths and weaknesses of that specific situation, how it impacts or how it contribute to the decision making of users of financial statement, and how it impacts the stakeholders of the organization. Calculate simply means you need to calculate the values, a mathematical process that you should be impacting on it. There is nothing required that you need to analyze it or you need to add some sort of commentary to it. If the word calculation comes in, you only need to calculate that specific aspect. If the word comments was mentioned in the question, you are only supposed to comment on that issues. You need to criticize it, you need to illustrate what are the problems, you need to explain what are the issues. You're not supposed to calculate it, you're not supposed to do anything else, but you need to only make your comments what you think is important. Once it comes to compare, so there are two different scenarios and you need to compare those situations to make sure which is a better situation for you or which is a better option for you to account it for. So that's the main idea of comparing the items or comparing the issues available within the question. Some other common aspects is conclusion. You must need to make some conclusion. You must be giving a clear-cut decision on a given situation, what you are going to do. So when a conclusion related question is available within your exam, you must be giving him first different outcomes. What are the outcomes of this situation? Multiple outcomes you can discuss, like there could be 2 or 3 outcomes, and then what you feel better is the most appropriate answer, and you must be giving a clear-cut decision. That's something I decide. There are 4 options over here within this scenario, and I'm going with option number 3, what I have given within the answer. Then it comes criticize. Criticize means evaluate and look into the specifically looking into the problems associated with the scenario. What are the problems? You're not looking at the strengths of something, you're looking into the weaknesses of the scenario. What weaknesses comes in and what are the problems associated with this mean calculation aspect. Then if examiner is going to ask you to define something, you must be giving a meaning, appropriate meaning, what you understand from this given scenario, and how this understanding was impacted. And you're not supposed to explain it, you just give a simple explanation to that situation given in an exam scenario. Once it's mentioned that describe, so you need to mention list of characters and qualities of that option which is given in the exam. So you need to create a picture with words and identification, which is more than sufficient for this describe verb. Once an examiner is going to ask you discuss about something, then in this situation you have to debate on it, you have to argue on it, what are the different aspects. So most of the time these verbs are most of the verbs are interchangeable, but as they are different verbs, so you need to understand what this actually verb mean. Then once its examiner is going to ask you evaluate means you must have to provide evidence of something, you must be supporting your evaluation, you must be giving arguments in a favor of something you have mentioned. So evaluate and making a conclusion is more or less a close in a close relationship. But once evaluate comes in, you need to look into the different aspect, and then you give your evidence why we'll be doing that specific item. Explain and describe is more or less, or define is most of the time shows the same meaning. So in this case you must have show some logical concepts, how you have developed your answer, and give your reasons for the events. So don't just provide list of points, but you have to provide some explanation, and you have to discuss something why such things could be done within that specific situation. Once it's mentioned illustrate something, you have to clearly explain, and you have to compare different examples within the scenario. Interpretation means you have to create a relationship between the financial statements, or between the data available and the explanation you are providing for. So you need to compare how any adjustment you have made to a scenario is going to impact the user, the specific user. Like in a question we have just looked into, while looking into the sample exam pattern, that how the changes you have made would impact the users of financial statement. Interpret is to create relationship. List means you have to list down all the items, all the things, all the qualities, or the reasons you are making it. So you're not supposed to discuss it, just make a list. Like we have mentioned over here, once it's asking you to define or describe, you must be listing out the characters and qualities, you are making a picture and identification, which is more than sufficient, but you're not supposed to explain it. So list means the same thing, you're not supposed to discuss it. When it means outline, it gives you it explains, it's asked you to create a main idea, the characteristics or the elements. But outline also constitute you have to briefly explain. But even in listing some points specific, if it's asking you to list the requirements of the standard, you're not supposed to explain it, you're just supposed to create a list. But if the examiner is going to ask you, or if examiners ask you outline the requirements, then you have to briefly explain it what these specific means. Last thing is prepare. In such a thing, you have to look into the format. For example, if examiner is going to ask you prepare a report, in that report you must be showing a proper report format to that answer within that specific situation or for that specific scenario. If you're going to answer it, if you're going to prepare a report, then that specific report should be in a way how the reports actually work. So that's how these common verbs actually works. Recommendation means you have to recommend different options, you have to provide an advice or a counsel to the examiner on a situation. When you're going to relate it, it's more or less like creating making an interpretation, right? Interpretation means you have to relate different ideas to a specific impact on the stakeholder. And even relate means the same thing with a bit different idea, because in interpretation you have to interpret the financial statement, and when the examiner is going to ask you to relate the things, then it is possible the examiner might be asking you to relate financial and impact of financial and non-financial information available in the financial statement, and how those financial and non-financial information would impact the users of financial statement. State means you have to explain it precisely, very to the point explanation, not a detailed explanation. State just give you a precise explanation to something. Summarize means the same thing. You have to give a very brief explanation to something. You're not supposed to give a detailed explanation. You have to give a brief explanation, a condensed account. Condensed account means a very small amount of discussion is required there, not a detailed discussion, but a brief discussion for that specific item is required. There are a few of the useful links, and important thing here I'm going to discuss few things is I have a document. These are the examinable documents. Those I'm sure every one of you must have read out these examinable documents. These are the different accounting standard. Those should be looked into SBR international paper, and you must be looking into all of those ideas. Important thing is, for current issue related topics, you have to look into these exposure draft and discussion papers and other documents. So these exposure draft, I recommend everyone, if you want to prepare yourself for topic areas specific related to the current issues related questions, which is I believe question number, it's question number 4, like second question in your section B, which is most related, sorry, question number 3 or question number 1 in section B, which is related to the modern business environment and how the current issues are impacted. So you need to look into these exposure draft at least once, so you would be able to make sure that you have an understanding of these exposure draft. I would recommend for this specific attempt, this conceptual framework 2018 document is very important. So you must be looking into these documents and understand the impact of this conceptual framework, how this impacts the calculation aspect, specifically if you're looking into the measurement aspect. So I have one question in our practice session for this specific criteria, the framework. So you would be looking into this conceptual framework idea very clearly. I have actually the document available, but I think I'll be sharing this document with you at the end of this session, all of you with these documents, so you will be well prepared for these aspects. So few of the important links are always available: examiner approach, examiner articles, and SBR examiner documents. Platform we have already discussed, but I've created a link over here. There's some of the CBE practice questions, CBE practice platform, and other things, those I believe is important. These are the list of important articles. The topic we have just discussed for question number 2 and question number 3. Question number 1 in section A and question number B in section question number 2, question 1 in section B and question number 2 in section A. If you want to prepare yourself very well for both of these two questions, as we have already looked into, that most of the students are not able to attempt question number 3 effectively. Why? Because the students are not very much prepared for the current issues related topics. So if you think what aspect was looked into that current issues, you must have gone through all these important or technical articles those were shared by ACCA examiner. So these articles have been shared with you section wise, those we have discussed in the very start of our presentation, that the main areas or syllabus areas of your sections are divided into 6 main sections, and for all of those 6 sections there are important technical articles provided by the examiners. So these are the links for you guys, and I'll be sharing with you. And I hope change in accounting regulation, we have just discussed IAS 21 does it need amendment? This is a very important article and you must be reading this one along with the other things. And for this interpretation of statement of financial stakeholders, you can prepare your whole section while looking into all these articles. What are the additional performance indicators, giving investors what they need, the integrated reported framework, and using the business model of a company to help analysis its performance. These are very important articles. You must be going through all these articles, and if anyone of you have a question related to these articles, I would recommend that we will be discussing that specific question or within our next session. Next thing is there are few of the pass rates, and these pass rates would be for different. September 2019, it's the highest pass rate was available for the individuals. Unfortunately, I think the percentage was removed from here, but it's more or less like 51.8% or 52%, more or less close to 52% was the percentage those individual pass in September 2019. And in March 2019, the graph bit dropped, but it was very much improved compared to December 2019. And I'm quite hopeful in this attempt. All of the students got a long time for the preparation of the paper, like 6 months due to COVID-19, and I hope a good result for the students in this attempt. So if you are planning to sit in September 2020 exam attempt, you need to focus on few of the important aspects. First thing is you need to spend sufficient time reading and assimilating the case study material before even contemplating answers the question. You need to understand what was the main requirement. First, you need to go through the whole scenario. You need to understand the situation given by the examiner, and you need to make sure what examiner is going to ask you and how you are going to develop your answer. You have a map in your mind before answering the question, before going through the answer sheet. Before moving to the answer sheet, you have to create a map in your mind how you're going to answer a question. Most importantly, most of the time your answer to your question is actually available in the question, of which is provided by the examiner. You need to mold those things to develop your answer. You need to spend sufficient time planning the answer to ensure they are structured logically, covering most important points, balancing in terms of depth and breadth of discussion based on the scores allocated to a question. Remember, you are not supposed to hypothetically answering the question. You must be looking into how many questions have been provided. So you must be very careful that your answer should not exceed the score provided by the examiner. You should not be explaining a question in great detail while examiner not asking for such detail. As you can identify from the score allocation, if the score allocation was minimum, then you must have to explain it in that way. Rather, you are going to explain it in a more detailed aspect. Next thing is, it is recommended to answer the requirement in order to specifically, especially examiner considered future exam may follow a timeline or have question requirement that progress in other ways. I believe this was something I have mentioned it specific to what we have already discussed is the linkage between the requirements of a question, right? So you must be considering how you're going to link the questions. I'm going to emphasize on these important aspects because these are really important for you guys. If you're not looking into the linkages, then you are not helping out your examiner to understand what you have mentioned, right? So by the way, I would say it importantly that your examiner, being an ACCA professional, that examiner is looking into your answer in a way he wants you. But I would recommend, it's easier, it will give you some professional insight into your answer if you are creating a linkage between your answer. It's really important for you, right? Okay. Then we have few of the questions that we'll be looking into the next day. For today, this is all we have done. Only one thing that I'm going to discuss with you guys is, all of you, is how we can identify the important aspects of, if I'm looking into how to identify, how to understand the accounting standard which will be applied to a specific situation. So as we don't have option available from the participants to participate in this specific um, webinar, I'm just giving you an understanding for few of the standards we have related to asset, how an asset should be accounted for, under different accounting standards. How we can account for different assets under different accounting standards. I hope everyone know there are many standards related to an asset. One is IAS 2, second one is IAS 16, third one is IAS 38, then IFRS 5, then IAS 40, and IAS 41. So I have mentioned many accounting standards. IAS 2 is related to inventories. IAS 16 is related to property, plant, and equipment. IAS 38 is related to intangible assets. IFRS 5 is non-current asset held for sale, and IAS 40 is related to investment property, and IAS 41 is related to agricultural assets. Right? So I'm giving you an understanding how different items should be accounted for under different accounting standards. So the main idea of classifying any item within an accounting standard is what was the intention of the management with this specific asset. What was the main intention? So you should be understanding the intention, and based on that intention, you can identify what was the accounting standard that should be applied to that specific asset. For example, I would say there is a car manufactured by Audi company. Audi company was manufacturing a car. How this car should be accounted for if in a given scenario an examiner is going to ask you, there is a car which was Audi company which has that car and asset, how should be accounted for? Do we have any answer how this should be accounted for under any of this accounting standards? So we need to identify what was the intention. As far as this situation is given, we don't find out what was the intention. Now looking into the intention, if Audi company intended to sell this car in normal course of business, then it should be accounted for under IAS 2 inventories, right? Second, if intention of Audi company is to use or give this car to any of the director, to a marketing director, suppose I would say a marketing director. So how this should be accounted for? Now this should be accounted for under IAS 16, irrespective this car was manufactured by the Audi company. Why? Because the car was not used or not sold in normal course of business. It's actually used in normal course of business. Rather selling it, the intention of the management has changed, and the management is going to use the same car within the normal course of business rather selling it out. So the standard was changed based on the intention of the management, right? I have another scenario. For example, a security company purchased 50 dogs for the 50 dogs, right? If there are 50 dogs purchased by a security company, so these are the dogs assets, right? It's a security company, and how these should be accounted for. We have three questions that we need to answer ourselves, right? So how we can account it for? I believe it's once again based on intention of the management. Suppose I would say intention is to help the security guards to fulfill the duties, like the security dogs or the dogs available with the security company. Now in this case, how are we going to account it for? uh, as this was used in normal course of business, okay. Someone has answered, many of you have answered few of the questions. If you guys have any question related to the specific standard, do let me know. I can discuss that standard with in a very summarized way, rather than a detailed way, in a very summarized way. And specifically talking about IS 32, someone has sent a message about IS 32. IS 32 is related to financial instruments, but if you're looking into the all the financial instrument as a whole, you must be looking into three specific standard: IS 32, IFRS 7, and IFRS 9. So these are the three standards, those are related to financial instruments. Inventories. Right now I have just discussed about the intention, and that intention is basically giving you an idea how you can account for the inventories. So right now I'm asking about the dogs. I believe everyone is thinking of this should be accounted for under IAS 41, agricultural assets, but we need to look into it. What was the intention? In this case, intention is to use those dogs in normal course of business, and that normal course of business is the security business, right? So under this situation, these dogs should be accounted for under IAS 16, property, plant, and equipment, rather accounting for under IAS 41. But if the intention was to help these dogs for breeding purposes, right? For breeding purpose. If there is a breeding purpose, now it is an agricultural activity. IS 41 is only applicable to those living animals and plants which are involved in agricultural activity. If a living animal or a plant is not involved in an agricultural activity, it can never be accounted for under IS 41. Right? So intention matters a lot. You need to be very careful. What was the actual intention of the individuals, how though of the management, and based on that intention, those items should be accounted for. Like in this case, this should be IS 41 now. But if those dogs which were already used by the company, but those dogs were used for security purposes, so those dogs will help the security guards in fulfilling their duties. So as this item, these dogs should be treated as a property, plant, and equipment item. So hence we are accounting it for under IAS 16, right? So this is something I have given you an idea. Accounting is always based on the intention. What was the intention about the specific item by the management? So that intention is actually helping those individuals, how those accounting would be helping those individuals, or how we are going to apply those specific accounting standard to a specific asset or a liability, or any item, income or expenses should be accounted for, right? If there is any question related to anything we have discussed right now, I'm open for the questions and we will be discussing. If there is no question, then we're going to end this session and we'll be going to start the next session, with a practice specific related to the consolidation. We're going to attempt a few of the questions in our next session with different scenarios, how we're going to account for the consolidation and how we're going to attempt question number 1 within our exam session. Up to now, if you have any question, do let me know. Okay, I believe there is no question right now from any student, but if still there is any question related to any specific topic area or any part of presentation, so you must be coming up with your question in our next day session, and I'll be very glad to answer your question. For today, I'm going to end up this session, and we'll be starting the next session with our practice, specifically to section 1, question number 1. And for the next 4 days, we'll be taking one by one all the sections of our exam. So thanks a lot, and have a good day. Bye to all.